So the question then is, why am I telling you all this? The reason is that you could utilize this yourself within your web applications. So if you think back to the previous week when I was showing you, or if you go up and you pull up the demo project, what this is allowing me to do is, remember when I could go in and I could go into my admin side and I could register a user for a particular session, and I could start typing in that session and it would autocomplete. That autocomplete is created by making these types of calls to the server and capturing data that can then be rendered out to the user. By making that server-to-server or computer-to-computer communication happen, I can dynamically go out and fetch that data and show it on the screen. All right, so let's basically write that. So the first thing that I need to do is I need to create a new web API controller to serve up the information. And what I'm thinking about serving up is that list of sessions that are available. So the idea is that I'll type in the seed of a session name, maybe the first 3 characters. I then want to take those first 3 characters and I want to go out and find every session by its name that matches that seed or contains that seed text. I think I call them session 1, 2, and 3, so we'll have to change them or add some more. But the idea is I can type in SEC and then I'll get back a result set of all those sessions that match. So if I'm doing a series, maybe there's a series of sessions on ASP.NET versus Java versus Ruby on Rails. If I type in JAV, I want all the Java sessions to come back. Just those sessions. So I'm going to create a new web API controller down here near the bottom.
Did you just add the API folder yourself? Was there something specific?
I added the API folder when I was cleaning up the project last week. If we had created a project from the start with web API, it would have an API folder. Okay. So I will call this my session service controller. And just like our apps and everything, that the controller part at the end is necessary. The front part, the session or service session service, is my choosing. Yes.
Do you use what type of controllers? An empty one or web API?
This is web API 1.2. How did you get to it? Did you right click, add, did you say controller?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, you went this way. Well, we can do it either way. We can do web API 2. That's perfectly acceptable. You get to the same spot. So, session service. So you end up with an empty controller. So you basically have to type in the get, put, post, and delete, depending on if you need them. In our case, we're just going to need the get. So I'll say public, and this will end up being a list of session, we'll just say session view model. And now this will be string seed. And we'll use session. I always get into debates with myself as to whether or not to create a new view model for my web APIs or just use my existing ones. There's schools of thought each way. For this, I'll go ahead and create a new class because then that keeps my API view models separate from my controller view models. So I'm going to generate a new class called session view model. So that created a new file in my solution under my API folder, session view model, and created a new blank class. So I did that through this accelerator. So generate a class. And that's how I got that. And I created that file with that empty class. So from here, we'll just say public int ID, public string name. And we can obviously add to this if we feel it's necessary, but that should be sufficient.
You can't use the one we already had.
Huh?
You can't use the one session view model we already
I
had.
just
Yeah, he decided to make an own, so I would not pay attention to that.
So I could have used the one I have, but then my APIs are now tightly coupled to my view controllers. So basically I have the same view model, I'm sharing it for both. Well, if I end up having to add some data to one or the other, maybe I don't want to expose it as part of the API. So I created a separate view model for that.
Why'd you name it the same thing?
Yeah.
It would it be better not
That's
view
so
model,
confusing.
just
Just
session
session
not
items.
parameters.
Should it be sessions API? My question is, does it automatic? Why doesn't it save to the models when it's a model?
Because, well, this is where things get interesting. When it comes to the APIs, the web API implementation prior to ASP.NET MVC 6, is that the one we're on? 7? Whatever. Web API is actually an independent implementation from ASP.NET MVC. And because of that, you don't have to follow the same conventions with APIs, with Web API, as you do with MVC. They fix that in whatever the newest version of ASP.NET is that they're coming out with.
So it knows that this session view model has to do with web API because the way you created the class.
Actually, it's simply because it's all compiled into the same project together. It doesn't care about what folder it's in or any of that stuff. It's simply because it's in the project. It's no different than if you created a console application and you use some other class. It's doing it based off of the logistics that it's all in the same project. Okay. So it's not using convention, it's just compiling it.
So we have two classes in the same project doing the same thing.
You do, but they're in separate namespaces. So this is underneath FS15 class project API. The other one is under FS15 class project models. So, yes, is it confusing? Sure, it can be, but they are separate and independent because they're under different namespaces. Now, since you're all saying it's confusing,
Basically, it makes sense to
It
computers,
is
not people.
usable.
what?
It makes sense to computers, but not people.
It can, yeah. So I'm going to change the name of it. So I rename the file, it'll rename the class, and it renames all the references within the project. You're welcome. Session with API view model. So now we have a separate class for our session web API view model. And the goal here is capital B. I do this every time. We want to find all the sessions that match the seed. Now we can do this a few different ways. We can do a contains, which basically means if that seed value is anywhere inside of the name, it'll come back as a result. There's also a starts with method that we can use on strings, which does just as it describes. It'll only return results that start with that seed value. Okay. So let's go with this. Let's go with start with. So So we need a list of session web API view model. We'll call it results. And then we'll do our where. And then we'll do the select. And then we'll create a new session web API view model for each one of our results. So the ID equals the ID of that session and name, same idea. And then we'll return the results. So that gives us our set of session results. So the error says inconsistent accessibility type. The return type list of session web API view model is less accessible than the method get. What's the problem? How do I fix it?
You have to go to the class and make it public.
Which class?
The session web API.
Yes. So my class here, my controller class, and my method are both public. This class that I'm returning, session web API view model, also has to have the same accessibility level. It has to be public. Otherwise, how can I return something that's not public to a caller that is public? Right? So everybody has to be at the same level. That whole idea of scope and permissions and security. So I have to go into my session web API view model, and you'll notice that there's no accessibility token or keyword here. So it's assumed that it's private. It doesn't say private. You can put private there, but it assumes that it's private. So you actually have to put public in front of class to make it public. And then by doing that, oh, I forgot to do one thing. That gets rid of that error. Now this error says cannot implicitly convert type system link iQueryable of session view or session web API view model to a list of session web API view model. Explicit conversion exists. Are you missing a cast? What's the problem here? Huh?
Two lists?
Two lists, yes. So I have to, so this result, when I call select here, this returns an iQueryable, which is an interface. It's an iQueryable of the object in the select. So it's an iQueryable of session web API view model. That has its own values, but we want to get a list out of that, so we have to call .toList. So that gives us a list. All right. So we now have a list of results that start with the seed value. So let's go ahead and run. So if we go /API/session service session ID, I'm sorry, seed equals sesh, we get back 3 sessions. Because all 3 of them start with session. So if I jump into my database, no, the ID is the ID coming from the database. So if I jump into the database, you'll see the parallel. So there's the 3. This ID is that number that you're seeing show up. So ID, name, ID, name, ID, name. Okay? So let's give these different names. We'll say ASP.NET MVC, Java Spring, Node.js, jQuery, room 1, 2, 3, 10. All right, so now we got 4 options. So if I come back to my service, whoop, and I do session again, I get back no results because nothing starts with sesh. So that worked. If I type jQuery, I get back one result, number 4. If I type in just an N, I get back node. Can I do star? If I put a J, I get 2. If I put a star, I get back nothing.
Is there no wild?
Because none of the sessions start with a star. How do I get them all? I have to write code to make it do that. So, if we want to do that, how do we want to do it? Is my question. Do we want to do it when the seed is blank or when the seed is a star?
Star. That's just one.
Okay. So the way that I would do it is I would take this result variable and I would kick it down here near the end. Okay? And then up here I would say var, what do you want to call this? DB set. Okay? So that's my variable. I'm calling it a DB set. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to select the content sessions. Alright, I kind of talked about this earlier before class with a small group. So what's happening here, actually I'll type it out, is at this point, this section of code is basically the equivalent of this. Select all from sessions. Get all the sessions, right? Does that make sense? So when this call is made, it converts this into this SQL statement. Now, what actually gets stored inside of dbset is not the results yet. The results of this doesn't get stored in dbset. What dbset is it's that iQueryable. So what I can do with that dbset now is I can continue to extend or expound on what the query is that I'm trying to construct. When this select statement gets run, assuming that none of this is here, that finally gets run when I call toList. Because toList says I need a list of objects. So the query has to be executed, the results get pulled back from the database, those results, those rows, get converted into objects, those objects get stuck into a list, and then that list gets returned to me. So at that point in time, does the query run? Up until this point, it's basically just a stream of text being carried around. It's a little more complicated than that, but that's the essence. So, if the seed is a star, do X. If it's not, do Y, right? That's the idea. So if seed equals star, do nothing, else filter the results based on starts with. And we can say dbset equals dbset. Now that may not work, and I'll show you how to fix that in a second. Alright? So, what we're saying here is if the seed equals star, do nothing. Don't filter. We want to get back all the results, right? But if it doesn't equal star, then we need to filter. So the dbset, that query, we're going to update it and add the where. Does that make sense? So this line literally does Okay? What?
I have no signal, so.
You
No. It's been a year, man.
dust off the book or go to some website or something.
Using it probably.
Fair enough. Alright, so it's appending this line, right? So now it becomes, if we go here, it goes select all from sessions where name likes seed plus percent sign. If we don't, we just do select all from sessions. Then down here, we basically say convert sessions into session web API view model. So this equals db set select .toList. But remember, up to this point, we're just creating the select statement. Then in here we're saying, take that DB set, that result set, and convert it into a collection of web API view models. Take that collection and convert it to a list. Actually execute this code. So this is forcing the query to go from select star to select ID comma name from sessions. Where? If there's a where. So we've now shrunk our result set. We don't need everything. We don't need all the rows or all the columns. We just need those two columns, name and ID. And then we're going to shove them inside of the session web API view model. So take that result and convert it to a list. Save. Does that make sense? So I'm going to rebuild. Oh, yeah, this is what I thought was going to happen. So it gets very mad when I take a DB set and I add a where to it and I return it to a DB set. The reason is DB set is literally of type DB set. It's a generic. It's a DB set of session DTO. Right? If you go back to our DB context, we have that one line in there that says DB set, angle bracket, session DTO. Using that generic, that's what this line gives us. When I call where on it, what happens is I end up with an iQueryable, which is an interface, an iQueryable of session DTO. The iQueryable is an interface, and what do you do with interfaces? Huh?
Implement that.
You implement them, yes. Guess what DB set implements? iQueryable. So the DB set, so that whole idea of reflection and polymorphism and all of that stuff that hopefully you learned back in Java starts to apply here. I can take a DB set and put it in an iQueryable, but I cannot take an iQueryable and put it in a DB set. So if I declare this as an iQueryable of session DTO, that DB set will go in there nicely. And then when I go down here and actually create an iQueryable and shove it inside of a variable that is of iQueryable, it will fit. Ta-da! So what was happening before is that this is a var. A var is a inferred type variable declaration. Let me say it this way. It's a variable declaration declaring a variable that infers the type. What that means is that, you know how this is called strongly typing, where you actually put the type next to the variable name. Putting var there says, I want the compiler to write this out, and I want it to base this value on whatever I set it to. So this is a DB set, so the compiler was saying, var, oh, this is DB set, so this will be a DB set of session DTO. Well, instead I strongly typed it and said it's an iQueryable of session DTO. So sometimes the vars are nice because you can kind of change things out and move them around, and assuming you don't make any major breaking changes, it all kind of flows. There are times when if you don't strongly type it, it tries to do its best guess, and it ends up not giving you the result you want. Alright, so that's compiled. So now if we run this with a star, we should get back all 4 results. There they are. So the idea of the wildcard is a relative concept. It's what you make it. If you choose to make it. Now we could have implemented it the same way and said if there's no seed to find, give us back everything. But ideally you don't want that to happen. You don't want an empty text box to give you back everything. You want it to give you back nothing. Right? So the star is a good option. You could also do a percent sign, which is the SQL notation for everything.
Literally everyone else uses Asterisk.
But you can do both. It's up to you. All right, so let's wrap this up. So that is implementing our web service.